If you want to get into a controversy, especially as a Christian talking to non-believers, talk about dinosaurs and that they coexisted with man. Here's an article I'd like to start with: Fossilized Footprints, a Dinosaur Dilemma. Dr. Andrew Snelling. Cool, dinosaur tracks. How can today's slow and gradual geologic processes over millions of years explain the preservation of delicate impressions in mud before they are washed away? Does the flood provide a better explanation? Plausible. Thousands of dinosaur footprints have been found in the geologic record, often in long trackways of successive left and right footprints. With the help of these clues, paleontologists have deciphered many details about the behavior of these fascinating creatures. Who has a dilemma? Dinosaur footprints create an apparent dilemma for creationists. How could they ever be made and fossilized during the flood? After all, with the flood waters covering the entire Earth, the dinosaurs would have nowhere to walk. Even if they did, the churning waters would erode away any footprints left behind. Secular geologists and skeptics often raise this question and are sometimes scathing in their mockery. Biblical geologists, on the other hand, say it is the conventional geologists who, in fact, face a dilemma. If geologic change takes place slowly, surely footprints made in mud would be obliterated by wind and rain long before the prints were covered by new sediments and hardened into rock. So who has the dilemma? To find out, let's explore a specific case of fossilized dinosaur footprints discovered in Israel. Pertinent example: just west of Jerusalem is a village of Beit Zait, I guess. There, on an exposed rock pavement, a left foot, right foot sequence of fossilized footprints is clearly evident. In a closer view, the imprints of 3 long toes are plainly visible. Perhaps the most interesting clue about the formation of these footprints is the type of rock in which they are found. It is a unique type of carbonate rock similar to limestone called dolomite. We see various types of limestone forming today, but dolomite requires unique conditions to form as determined in the laboratory. So dolomite forms today only in small quantities and only in extreme environments where dinosaurs could not possibly have lived, such as hot springs and desert salt flats. All other theoretical environments where dolomite might form are likewise not places where dinosaurs could live, such as hypersalty lakes and oceans with unusual chemistry. So conventional geologists who believe that the present is the key to the past would not expect to find dinosaur prints in dolomite. The best explanation they can suggest is that, for some reason, a dinosaur walked across an intertidal mudflat in an arid region where there was nothing for him to eat. Wow. Stretching. The problem is complicated by the vast scale of the rock deposits. The dinosaur prints are found in the lower section of a thick sequence of alternating layers of dolomite and limestone, half a mile thick, 2,600 feet or 800 meters, collectively called the Judea Group. Jerusalem sits on the Judea Group, which includes Mount Zion and the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah. A group in geology is not based on rocks in a relatively small area, but a pile of rocks identifiable over a very large region. Since it is a group, we must conclude that these thick limestones and dolomites in Israel were formed over a vast region. The only known way to produce large quantities of limestone, such as we find in the Judea Group, is an ocean environment. The easiest way to form widespread dolomites, too, is an ocean. But the water must be of unusual chemistry, so the Judea Group probably formed in a vast ocean sitting over the entire region. This wasn't an optimum place for dinosaurs to live. Okay, let's go with conventional wisdom. So how did the dinosaurs make these footprints under the ocean? Everyone agrees that the dinosaurs were land dwellers. So conventional geologists cannot explain why they were walking out across an ocean floor. Furthermore, even if the dinosaurs somehow left footprints in soft dolomite mud on a shallow ocean floor, how would the water saturate sediment harden to fossilize the footprints? This can be done in only 2 ways: by exposing the sediment to the air so that the water evaporates from the mud, or by burying the mud so that the overlaying sediments squeeze the water out of the mud. What do you think? Well, explaining the dolomite layers. How do flood geologists overcome all these challenges? First, let's explain the unusual chemical conditions. The pre-flood ocean floor would have been littered with the remains of mollusk shells in the form of lime. Mollusk shells are made out of calcium carbonate, the main ingredient in lime. When the fountains of the great deep broke up at the start of the flood, massive earthquakes would have caused the ocean waters to rise and sweep in across the pre-flood supercontinent like tsunamis, carrying the lime sediments landwards with them. The water temperature would have progressively increased as hot volcanic layers were added to the ocean. Also, many volcanic eruptions would have added magnesium to the lime-rich flood waters. This combination of hot water, lime, and magnesium would produce the layers of dolomite. Thus, the catastrophic plate tectonics can explain the increase in floodwater temperatures, the inundation of the continents, and the formation of enormous amounts of marine carbonate sediments on the continents. So, explaining the dinosaur footprints. As the floodwaters swept inland, dinosaurs would have been forced to swim to survive the rising floodwaters. Elephants today react similarly when faced with rising floodwaters. The water level at each location would not have risen at a constant rate. As global sea level rose, water would rise and fall locally with the surge and ebb of tsunamis and the shifting tidal pull of the moon and the sun. So the water level at each location would not have risen at a constant rate. As global sea level rose, water would rise and fall locally with the surge and ebb of tsunamis and the shifting tidal pull of the moon and the sun. At the same time, earthquakes and continental collisions would raise and lower land at different places and times. Consequently, warm surging waters of the catastrophic flood might cover a particular lowland area with dolomite layers, only to expose that same area again for a few hours. This cycle could occur several times before the flood finally covered the area completely. Some dinosaur prints may have been made by fully submerged dinosaurs, others in shallow water, and others on temporarily exposed surfaces. Any brief exposure would probably not provide enough time, however, for the soft dolomite layer, composed of a natural quickset cement, to harden sufficiently to preserve the footprints. Instead, the next surge of dolomite sediment would bury the footprints, even if still underwater, and the weight of the overlying layers would squeeze the water out of the dolomite and harden it to rock. The dinosaurs that made the footprints would again be swept away in the flood waters. Within weeks or months, they would succumb to exhaustion and die, to be buried in flood sediments higher up in the sequence. The longer you survive in the flood, the higher you are in rock sediment. It's not a matter of time passing like hundreds of millions of years. This explanation fits what is found in the geologic record. Dinosaur body fossils are invariably found in sediment layers higher in local strata sequence than their fossilized footprints. Will they walk and then wait a couple of 100 million years? So God's word solves the dilemma. Flood geologists have a satisfying explanation for fossilized dinosaur footprints in dolomite layers. But conventional geologists who insist on slow and gradual geologic processes struggle to explain both the dolomite layers and the preservation of the dinosaur footprints. So the answer is, when we base our understanding of Earth history on God's Word, we can explain fossilized dinosaur footprints even in supposed marine dolomite layers. The truth is much more exciting than man's made-up history, especially when it's not evidence. So let's jump to that account, the one in Glen Rose, Texas, where Dr. Don Patton, geologist, explains, well, they, meaning those in opposition to our point of view about dinosaurs and being biblical and being on the earth with man, well, they've heard about our work at Glen Rose, Texas, all the way to Oxford, England. and they acknowledge the implications. This would be sufficient to falsify the modern theory of evolution, if these human footprints, which are in dinosaur footprints, were true. We can demonstrate that that's not the case, for if they are in fact genuine footprints contemporary with that of the dinosaur. But if you find bones, that's not nearly as important as finding tracks. You see, the tracks cannot be eroded and redeposited. Here we see that bones that were found in the same formation as Dinosaur National Monument in the Dakota sandstone, many dinosaurs beautifully preserved, and here are two modern human skeletons. There's no question that it's human and it's modern. They're right there on the same level. They shouldn't be with the dinosaurs. According to the evolutionists, they should be something like 100 million years apart. But evolutionists falsely claim without any evidence that this was an intrusional barrier that came along later or something. Automatically, it's assumed by evolutionists that this is an intrusional barrier, whatever that's supposed to mean. They claim without proof, in other words, that the humans didn't originally die there, but were transferred there later by some unknown means. So you see then the importance of the tracks. They can't explain that unless the tracks were carved. Let's go to Glen Rose, Texas, here in the Paluxy River Dinosaur Valley State Park. We find many beautiful dinosaur tracks. You can go online to look at those. I'll show you where the website is. But in addition to the dinosaur tracks, we also have tracks that look very, very human-like. A number of these tracks were found which continued back up under the bank of the river. As they explored more and more, they found more and more, hundreds, which would not therefore be able to be carved as the evolutionist camp claims. They claim the first ones that were discovered, they were carved, but then they discovered some later on as they dug up through the river edge that's fossilized. Stan Taylor found a sequence of at least 6 human tracks in a right-left pattern that did continue back up under the overburden, which they removed physically. Notice also the mud push up surrounding the footprints, which argue strongly that it was not carved. In other words, they took one of the footprints and cut it off into a big rock boulder and brought it to the lab and cut through the footprints of the human footprints and found it was mud push-up. So you can't carve that. Mud push-up bubbles, tiny little microscopic bubbles. The dinosaurs stepped there first, of course. A portion of it, the forepart, filled in with other material, and then the human stepped on it, leaving the depression of his foot within the dinosaur track. That had to come all at once contemporaneously. Now, the dinosaur weighing a number of tons made the initial impression, which was only an inch and a half deep perhaps, and then it was in that material, which was not quite as resistant, that the human stepped and left an impression. As some said, he just didn't carry enough weight to make a good impression with the normal substrate in the area, but let the dinosaur make the impression in order to walk safely in the animal's tracks, and since it infilled with slushier type material, he left a good imprint there also, and it was safer to walk for the human. So in the Taylor trail, we have a double print. First, the dinosaur stepping, the infill material accounting for the flush appearance of the dinosaur track, and then a human stepping within it later. As we discovered and considered this, we got some unexpected help from an unexpected source. Mary Leakey discovered a series of tracks in Africa, a series of clear tracks, a double track. One individual was stepping in the tracks of the other. Note that the fossilized dinosaur footprints found all over the world are best explained by the catastrophic worldwide flood, and not by slow and gradual geologic processes over millions of years in which they would be washed away. Notice the statement by Russell Tuttle, who's professor of anthropology at the University of Chicago and with the Primate Research Center at Emory University. He says the third individual, G3, carefully walked in the footprints of the second. He points out that the GWI hunters of southern Africa follow in the footprints of the person ahead in order to minimize noise and to protect their feet, and says overprinting would be a prudent habit. So, R.H. Tuttle, professor of anthropology. And so this is documented to be not that unusual of a feature. In fact, when we notice animals walking along, cows following each other, they step in each other's tracks. When we look at the entire sequence of tracks beginning down at the bottom, we see a left, a right, a left, a right, a left, a right, a left, a right, so on, up on the trail. They are consistent. The rights are where they're supposed to be. The lefts are where they're supposed to be. In each of the 14 tracks, we find at least a general human shape. Those shapes are very consistent in length, 7 of them reveal individual toes.